Welcome back to Season 2 of the Business Culture Podcast, a platform to learn through the power of context and story. It's great to be back with you. This season is all about impact. I'll be chatting to impact makers across industries and geographies to understand how they have made true impact on their customers, colleagues, and communities. In this episode, I once again had the pleasure of chatting with Chris Bentley. A familiar face and voice to the golf and club industry, Chris is a futurist, somebody who can see things before it becomes a reality in the greater society. In this episode, we unpacked the importance of running a club like a business rather than a club. Chris, together with his capable team at Royal Johannesburg and Kensington, have and continue to build a business which is diversifying in revenue streams and thereby de-risking itself in the process. Let's get into the interview. I'd be interested to know from your side, how would you define the difference between running a club as a club and running a club more as a business? Is there any definition or anything that for you kind of provides some kind of insight or point of departure on the difference between those two?
Every golf club is a business. I think that's first and foremost, but there's quite an archaic way of the history of how golf clubs have worked in the past and what direction they're going to in the future. I think there's, quite a few fundamental discussions to be had around, what the best structure is for golf. And I'm going to start in reverse by saying some of the best golf clubs in the world are run by committees. Okay, so let me say that up front. But I think at many golf clubs across South Africa specifically, and obviously I'm generalizing, but from a efficiency perspective, I think a lot of golf clubs are starting to learn that if they want to progress and they want to innovate, they need to leave it up to the professionals. And what I mean by that is that committee structures and guys serving on boards or committees in office, the change is so quick. And I think your club manager today is a very different person to the club manager, 15 or 20 years ago. Club managers today are certified, qualified. They're professionals at what they do. And I think they need to be given the responsibility. And I think the fundamental kind of adaptation that's happening now is that boards and committees are seeing that the biggest impact they can have is with good governance and strategy, and let the professional get on with the job. Guys that are sitting on committees, I take my hats off to them, and they are professionals in their fields and they qualified in their fields. Whereas now the club manager, he's qualified in his field. And so the kind of trust and responsibility is shifting a lot. But you still have to have that, that good governance structure that can drive vision and develop master plans, essentially. But I think from an execution perspective, specifically front of house operations, it's got to be left to the guy that's doing it day to day. And I think slowly but surely, like you said, I think Raw's been a catalyst for that example. And slowly but surely, a lot of clubs are starting to adapt. I had a call this week from a golf club in Joburg saying, please, can you send us your constitution? We want to change to a board structure where there's more responsibility on the club manager. I mean, essentially, the club manager is the only guy that can get arrested. So why shouldn't there be?
It's a great starting into this conversation, and I guess it leads quite nicely into the next question, which is, you were a big part of the change at Royal in terms of shifting from one to the other. At the outset, it probably seems like quite the typical sort of how do you eat an elephant kind of scenario. What was your, if you could give listeners an advice or any advice into how you start that process or how you kind of move to that process, what was it for you that worked? How did you get that process going in terms of the shift?
Well, I think, look, when I started at Royal in 2013, I didn't have too much to lose. I was young and hungry, and I wanted to prove a lot of people wrong that I could do the job. And I think it does take a lot of guts, and people don't like change. So, but there's a quote from a guy called Warren Bennis from the Leadership Institute of California, and he's famous for saying, in life change is inevitable, but in business change is vital. And it takes a lot of strategic clarity, and you got to take people on a journey to get their buy-in. My chairman at the time was a guy called Gordon Odgers, very successful businessman who specialized in acquisitions and mergers and things like that. And he taught me that the most important thing about a meeting is the meeting before the meeting, and taking people on that journey with you and building that vision of why this is the right way to go. And obviously it needs to appeal to the majority was key. And so, we built this vision of how it should work. And I think the easiest question to ask yourself is, if this was my business, would I set it up with X amount of committees? Is this the best way to run my business? And I think if you ask 99% of people out there, nobody would ever set up their golf club in a committee structure. So, I think fundamental change in the foundations of how the business is structured leads to opportunities, specifically in culture, in building people, efficiency. And I think once you have those foundations and the supporting structure, I think what it leads to is passion, and it enables you to be empathetic, and staff start feeling more valued, and they have the support and the responsibility, essentially. But it comes down to strategic clarity and getting everybody's buy-in, and making sure that the majority believe that that's the best way forward, for growth and success.
And I think, the one point that strikes me as you talk about that is the importance of decisiveness. I think in any business environment, the more decisive the leadership is able to be, the more things we can create momentum and have a bias towards action, et cetera, et cetera. Do you feel that that's one of the most important pluses or strengths of running it as a business rather than a club? Or are there other things that you feel, are also strengths of running it more like a business? Is decisiveness a big part of that?
Yeah, I think you have to be decisive, and you have to have buy-in, and you have to have different ideas, and you've got to formulate what you believe is going to be in the best interest of the club's growth and retention and success. I think one of the big things is going about things with tact. And Winston Churchill said that tact is the ability to tell somebody to go to hell in a way where they look forward to the trip.
I love that.
And so I'm certainly not an expert at what I do, but this is what I'm trained to do. And I think formulating ideas with successful businessmen that are part of the club, that are there to assist you along the way, I think getting that buy-in and their experience really does help you formulate the best vision for the future. And I think essentially it allows you to develop a master plan that lives beyond the term in office, if I can put it that way. And so, change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes dedication, and it takes buy-in. And I think, the plans that we're busy rolling out now at Royal are big. It's big stuff. And we're only seeing that come through 5 years later, and the decisions we took in 2015, 2016, that's what we're rolling out now. So these things take time. And like I said, it's about taking everybody on that journey and making sure that everybody knows what their responsibility is.
You've spoken a lot about change so far, and I guess one of the most difficult things with change is that they say it's hard in the beginning, messy in the middle, but beautiful at the end. I've got no doubt that you've faced quite a few challenges, setbacks, et cetera, in this significant change in the club. What is some advice that you can give to people that are perhaps not as far along the journey as you are in changing that structure, and how to be, I suppose, a bit more resilient to not get knocked off the path because there's a little bit of obstruction or whatever the case might be?
Well, I think with any change, there's going to be adversity. So if you expect that there will be adversity, you'll be a lot more prepared for it. And like the saying goes, through every storm, there is a rainbow. And we have to go through that adversity to be successful and stress test ourselves, our vision, the management structure. You need to stress test everything at every corner. And I think, like I said, that's how you end up coming out with the best results. And I think the easiest way to do that is to paint the vision. What do people want? And I remember listening to a podcast a couple of months ago you did with our good friend Mike Learmate, and he said, don't treat people treat people the way they want to be treated. And the same principle applies to business. I think give people what they want and paint that vision. And again, I think if you accept early on that you will never get 100% buy-in, and you start trying to, convince people or show people that we want to do what's best for the majority, and you have a target of, let's say, 80%. If you satisfy 80%, you're doing pretty well. And so you need to know upfront there's going to be adversity with any change. People don't like change. They don't want to change until they see the change happening and they go, this is pretty cool, And so they will change at a later point once they start enjoying the new amenities, the new structure, the more efficient way of doing things. And you just got to paint that vision and trust that the process that you go through will take you there. I think one of the other key points for the listeners is that, we live in this age, even more so today with technology, and people aren't really talking to each other anymore. Everything's on a keypad. And, I've taken a personal policy that if I receive a complaint, first thing I do is phone and ask when we can have coffee. Or these days, when can we meet on Zoom? Because it's just so much easier to connect on a personal level, to overcome concerns, challenges, to agree to disagree even, but that does get you one step closer to the vision.
I think what you're alluding to there as well, it's such a good principle throughout business is listening with the intent to understand, not just the intent to respond. And I think the authenticity that comes with that, taking of your time to spend with that person, and just understanding a little bit deeper as to what the true nature of the complaint is, or the dissatisfaction, for that matter, goes so much further than just trying to solve that individual problem. It's a great lesson, I think, for us all, because I think we all fall into this trap of sometimes not paying enough time or attention to truly listening consciously. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, context is such a big thing these days. And it has been, forever. And once there's always a reason behind something. And once you get yourself into a position where you can explain where you're coming from, what your objectives were, why you took those decisions, and almost, transparently take that person on your journey. That I often find that it's very seldom that by the end of explaining something to somebody, whether it's a, billion rand development or an issue with a pitch mark, by the end of it, you're on the same page, or at least you understand why those decisions were taken.
And if we talking about context there, you guys, as you've alluded to, have been on a pretty special journey since 15, 16 in terms of the change with Royal. In terms of learning from context, could you give us some insights into, the plans and what's been happening there, and perhaps, some of the lessons that you've learned, since then up until now?
Sure. I hardly know where to start. It's been such an incredible journey at Royal. We started at a point in 2013 where there was lots of adversity, a lot of unhappy members, no vision, a architect structure within the club. And, we just slowly took it in chunks. And by 2017, we were achieving beyond expectations. The renovated East Course and the master plan in terms of our property developments, which we're currently rolling out, everything's just coming together beyond what we planned, from receiving numerous World Golf Awards and, our team at Royal coming together like a family. And when I say the team at Royal, I refer to the staff and the management, and the impact that their kind of passion has on the membership. Kind of, they're forced into this family culture at the club. And so I think, we've overcome a lot, and we've learned a lot along the way. We're learning every single day, but we've got the trust, guidance, and support of the membership. And I think once you get that, it really does make things so much easier. Once, if you got over 1,000 members buying into the vision and living the brand, instead of moaning about the pitch marks and, whatever, it really makes a big difference. And from an efficiency perspective and delivering beyond expectations, it's win-win. And that vision becomes a reality far quicker.
Yeah. You I think you've done a wonderful job of the nature and the delivery mechanism of how you communicate with your members. In other words, keeping them in the know, transparency, et cetera, et cetera. Could you, for the sake again of the listeners and perhaps some guidance along that front, is how do you believe one best communicates with a member base like yours? What are some of the principles or approaches that, and somewhat off the cuff this question, but is there anything that you can allude to or provide that gives insight into how you go about your communication with your members?
So I think, you're touching on a point here that is absolutely critical for club managers specifically, and teaching pros and golf directors. You've got to be communicating. And I think there's a couple different ways to communicate effectively, and you've got to use every opportunity from a platform perspective. Nothing beats face-to-face, number one, whether we're in a pandemic or not, whether there's restrictions or not. And so front of house communication is absolutely number one in my opinion. And, I set up my diary weekly to block off time to spend front of house. And, on a Saturday, I don't even open my office. I don't come upstairs. I am front of house on the patio, on the golf course, and I'm just saying hi and how are you and how's your family, and, just chatting to the guys. And often that's when I get, the best questions. And it can be simple stuff that somebody's not willing to take the time to send an email about or set up an appointment. But I think that type of feedback on the ground, just, simple things. Why don't you have Kilkenny on tap? There's 15 of us that would love that on tap. Oh, great. Jeez, he wouldn't have taken the time to, send you an email on it. But now that he's seen you, you get that feedback. Whereas if you're not there, you'll never receive that. And so I find that front of house, let's call it PR, is absolute key from a communication perspective. And then I look and say, what communication would I like to receive? At the moment I get, some places send out a weekly newsletter. Some places send out a YouTube video every single day from the CEO, and I find it a little bit too much, to be honest. I think a lot of people are over communicating and almost for the sake of it, just to say I've done it and it's, whatever. So I look at it and I say a really good newsletter once a month with real content in it that's authentic. We've taken the time to develop that communication in a very professional manner, and it paints the whole picture of what's happened throughout the month. I find that that's got a higher open rate versus a weekly communication, and you've got time to plan for it, from, quality of marketing, communication, all that kind of thing. I find that the open rates are better. I find that the communication we receive back is far more positive and appreciative for the time and effort we put in versus, your kind of weekly stuff. And then obviously you've got your day-to-day social media. How much do you want to put out there? What is the tactical approach? And ultimately, when it comes to communication, what are you trying to achieve? Why do it? You need to ask yourself, what are the objectives here? Am I just sending something out for sending it so that we are seen to be doing what everybody else is doing? Or what is the actual purpose? And I ask my team all the time, if we do this, why are we doing it? What are we trying to achieve here? And then in 2 weeks' time, let's ask ourselves, did it work? And did we actually accomplish what we set out to communicate?
I think it's the best answer I've heard in a long time. And the way that I sum it up in my head is we don't communicate for reputation management. We communicate to transfer meaning or to evoke conscious consideration, if that makes sense. It's not about just trying to manage a reputation. It's you want people to be conscious when they're reading that. It must mean something to them. And sometimes, as you so well said, less is more. It's not I don't know about you, but cheap is with our phones and everything these days, we're so distracted by so much white noise that sometimes it's the people who communicate less but more intentively that we actually listen to.
Absolutely. And I think taking the opportunity to kind of, we live in the most illogical world at the moment. It was illogical before the pandemic and it's illogical today. And I think not losing sight of, that human connection and what humans are made up of in terms of look, smell, hear, feel, all those elements of what triggers us, leveraging those opportunities. I don't care what anybody says. When I'm smiling behind my mask, they can't see it, but they can feel it. And those opportunities, we can't forget about those opportunities and what makes us react in certain ways to things.
You've started to answer my next question really well, actually. I've always believed that you've had a very good sense of what represents value to the contemporary member, the member of today, in the sense that I think what is perceived as value today is evolving, it's changing. We could talk about this subject for the entire day, but
let's do it.
To maybe just scratch the surface, I suppose. How do you go about defining or even just starting to define what value looks like today from a membership perspective?
I think there's a couple of things. A lot like Jeff Claus, I don't believe in discounts and things like that. I believe in adding value and delivering beyond expectation. When we have patrons come through the door, we have to deliver beyond what they believe they're going to receive when they come to Royal Johannesburg and Kensington. And we take that approach with anything and everything we do, whether it's a round of golf on a Friday, whether it is a special resolution in AGM, we have to deliver beyond expectation. And I think when you take that approach, you're giving people far more value than what they thought they were purchasing. And I've found that kind of resonates with membership retention, membership growth, and the ultimate way to market your business being word of mouth. Other members then go to their mates and they say, you don't understand, you've got to join Royal Johannesburg and Kensington Golf Club. The golf course is not great. It is beyond great. It's exceptional. And the pandemic's taught me one thing about this. When we were in hard lockdown last March, we came through to the club quite a bit from a maintenance perspective. And, when you walk in these doors and there's no people here and you're out on the course and there's nobody there, it shows you exactly what this facility is worth. It's worth nothing without people. And everything that we do is about people. People buy from people. People have to feel the value. And I think that goes beyond a price tag. And that's the kind of management approach we take. And it's not just a a day-to-day management approach, but it's what we want to do. We want to make people happy, and I think that value, in terms of trying to make people happy every single day, that comes across, and in turn, it makes them feel valued, no matter what the prices are.
It's not hard to understand why you have been successful as a leader in the industry, in terms of the fact of how you see value. Because every time I speak to you about this, you always come back to the human, the person, what is of value to a person, not as what is of value to necessarily a customer. And it's such a powerful viewpoint, because when you're in touch with a person, you're in touch with how people change. And what I always find interesting, Chris, is that what I call the MVP, minimum viable product. If you go to a random golf course on a quiet Monday, or whatever the case is, the value that you receive on that day, when there's no golf day on, when there's no special event or anything like that, just the MVP, the minimum viable product, is so interesting to witness across the clubs in South Africa, because it's the green fee for the most part often doesn't differ too much. It might a little bit, but the cost isn't changing. What does the value look like? And I think the clubs that are really creating that strong minimal viable product are the ones that are building great memberships. It's not just about the member days or the big days of the club. It's about the average day and what people get out of those days. And I think you guys have, whenever I come to your club, there's always that base level of forthcomingness from staff that reminds you why you're a member of the club.
Well, I mean, you're touching on an important point here, because just as important as it is to develop a vision that the members buy into, you've got to be doing that with your staff. They need to know what their purpose is. Why are they cutting the grass? Why are they, filling the bucket on number one with hot water and not cold water in winter? They need to understand why we do things. And the second, you spending time with your team, explaining to them, this is where we want to be in 5 years' time. This is why we're building gyms and restaurants, and we're trying to attract the entire family here, and selling the vision to your staff and building the vision with your staff before it even gets to the members. Let them believe that they are completely in the movie, and they have a serious part to play in the success of driving strategy. And I think what's also another point that I wanted to touch on, even though this isn't an empathetic view towards people, but it is important for management to explain to the member, to the patron, that we are trying to take the financial burden away from you. We're trying to give you more, and we're trying to take the financial burden off you. And that, again, this was all pre-pandemic strategy. And what I mean by that is saying, we understand the supply and demand issues in golf. Even though it's thriving through the pandemic, my view is that it will normalize at some point, and your business model is still going to be what it was, right? You have to have a strategy of saying, how am I going to generate new revenue that was never there before? I think one of the best things that's happened to us in the pandemic was what we were forced to do to replace lost revenue, specifically in food and beverage and hospitality. No functions, no events. And we were forced to create this curbside delivery service, home delivery meals. How do we do it? How does it work? What's the safest way to get this thing done? But what's happening now is, as we kind of come out of these lockdowns, our curbside delivery service has been obviously supported well by the members, but it's a new revenue stream. We're going to continue with that inevitably. And you look at what we're doing in property, that is annuity income in perpetuity. So before we collect subscriptions at the beginning of the year, we are collecting money from property now that supplements those subscriptions. 20 years ago, there was joining fees. Those things are gone now. There's no such thing as a joining fee anymore. And you need to supplement that stuff. CapEx is a serious issue within clubs. Your 3,500 mower that you're buying in, 2010, it's almost double the price, including CPI. The import duties, etc., those things are far more expensive than they used to be. And people's expectations are far higher than they used to be. And they want it to be less money. So let's give the people what they want. Let's create new revenue streams. Let's bring the entire family in. We need to take care of our capex. We need to get everything done without putting more financial burden onto the members.
Yeah, look, I think, there's that old saying of sweating the asset, or however you want to define it. But your view on it speaks into this notion of creating a business rather than a club, or running it as a business. The asset of space is something which golf clubs have always been blessed with, and yet so few have really leveraged the true benefit of space. And as space becomes more and more desired, it becomes more and more of an asset that one can leverage, I would say. Not every club is the same, and not every club can generate the same types of revenue streams. But do you have any advice, I guess, in how a club can start considering what revenue streams might be best for them? Is there a methodology, or is it very much individual to every different club?
I think there's some individualism in terms of the clubs, but I think in general, you listen to guys like Martin Slumbers at the RNA. The RNA's sole strategy is to bring more women into the game of golf. Okay. And our sole strategy is for our members to bring their entire family to the club. It's far more than just golf, so whether that's a running trail, or you're building a lodge down the first-hand side of number one, or you're building restaurants or gym or whatever, you need to create amenities to cater for the entire family, because instead of, one beer, it's now 3 drinks and a massage and a gym session and a gym membership and an apartment. And, so it all kind of, starts tying together. But if we can attract a member to bring the entire family here and have amenities for them, it sounds to me like that's a pretty good investment. We plan that in the next couple of years, most likely our membership will close, because if members start bringing their entire family here, we won't have the capacity to take in additional patrons. And so starting with your current customer, I think that's where it starts. It's not about, let's go find new business. I think it starts with your current member, their retention, and how do you give them what they want? And how do you attract them to bring their entire family into the club? And I think that's what's worked reasonably well for us. We're still in the construction phase of a lot of our stuff, but by the end of this year, we will cement being a full-on family club where it's far more than just golf. And then by mid next year, we will have 200 residents living on the estate. And I think from a all-encompassing perspective, that's where we want to be.
I can't tell you how much that speaks to me as a father of 2 young kids, and someone who often feels, I hope my wife isn't listening to this, but feels guilty about going and playing golf, especially on a weekend. The optimum ideal situation is, why remove or separate golf from family? Why not have golf with family in exactly what you've alluded to? And yeah, it's great to see that the leaders of the industry are going that way, because if you create an immersive environment like that, you don't just make the golfer happy, you make the family happy, and you increase the basket size as a result of that increased value, which I think is, as I understand it, what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be risks. And I think what we've done is we've kind of taken a piece of paper and said, what are all the risks that face us? Okay. From a sustainability perspective, a capex perspective, etc. And, the obvious things, Eskom, massive risk to a golf course, right? How do we take that risk, turn it into an opportunity? How do we do that? And, so we're doing things like, we're saying, Eskom is a serious risk, because if we can't turn our pump stations on, we can't water the greens. But what's the opportunity within something like that? Moving to electric machinery, save R1 million a year on fuel. So if you can get your workshop, your pump stations onto and I'm digressing a little bit here, but if you get that stuff onto solar on a zero capital basis at a cheaper monthly rate, and you can then adapt into, that Tesla model and save R1 million a year, surely that is a solution to a risk, and I think that's the approach we take with everything. How these are the 150 risks facing us from national level to, on the ground. And what are the opportunities? How do we flip this thing on its head?
Yeah, I think that I know you're giving a talk quite soon on risk mitigation, which I think is so great to see that you're taking the lead with that. But at the same time, it's that old thing about don't wait for the risk to become a reality. Wait, do something about it in the here and now. I think that's a huge differentiator between the leaders who create environments that are robust versus those who are constantly reactive. So yeah, Chris, it's fantastic to, I think, just to scratch the surface of your thinking, and yeah, I think it's that spark that many people need to start that process, because it's not about, it's like the old saying I always say, the hardest part is actually putting on your running shoes. It's not going for the run, it's actually just getting the running shoes on, and then once you're on the road, it's actually okay. But I think the catalyst or whatever it is, the inspiration is often the hardest part. So I think it's hugely valuable. I know that you're a massive golfer as well, and I can't let you go anywhere without our golfing segment, which is our Quickfire Questions. And it is always interesting contrasting someone like yourself to a previous guest like Dale Hayes, who perhaps has some of the more legacy opinions or preferences when it comes to the golfing world. So I've got 7 or so quick fire questions here, which I'm going to throw your way. And the whole idea here is that you give the answer as quickly as possible with as little consideration and really whatever comes to mind the quickest. So without further ado, first question is the next South African to win a major championship?
Dylan Fratelli.
Wow. Okay, you can only play one of the other. You can only play one or the other for the rest of your life. Parkland or links?
Parkland.
No surprises there. The most impactful, influential golf course in the world, in your opinion?
Augusta National.
What's bigger, the Open or the Masters?
Masters.
You can either drive it like Bryson or putt it like Brad Faxon.
Faxon.
Who's the GOAT, Tiger or Jack?
Tiger Woods, because of commercial.
There's the businessman right there. The best run tournament you've ever been involved in or attended?
The Masters.
And last but not least, your all-time four-ball, including yourself, and they can be dead or alive.
My dad, my son, and Nelson Mandela.
Man, I don't think that is not one that I saw coming, but certainly I can understand why you would have gone that route. I don't know what Nelson's swing would have been like, but I'm sure his banter on the course would make up for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, Chris, and I guess to chat quickly about the golf side, which I'm always fascinated in as well. You've recently hosted a tournament at Royal for the Sunshine Tour, and you've always been involved in the PGA and that side of things. What's your feeling on South African golf at the moment, especially considering we've had a nice uptick in the world rankings with our players? We seem to be getting some good traction with the young guys like Wilco and Garrick and those guys. What's your kind of sentiment and feeling on where things are going in that respect?
No, I mean, it's quite incredible the work that the Sunshine Tour does to develop golfers the way we have developed golfers over the last couple of decades. considering the size of South Africa, it's quite remarkable. It's a bit like New Zealand and their rugby. It's just mind-blowing when you consider the amount of people that are in the country. And to see guys like Garrick, I mean, he played here in March when we had that Kit Kat Pro-Am. And what a great guy. He's so disciplined and organized, and he knows what he's going for, but like a lot of golf clubs should be. But I think the talent that we're producing is just beyond expectation, really. I think Garrick and, guys like Chris Bentley. I mean, I remember working at Serengeti Golf Club, and he was just a kid on the range, and he was just there all day striping balls. And he's had, I think it starts a little bit earlier, where the work that Golf RSA are doing and the foundations they're putting in place, the Ernie Els Foundation, Louis Foundation down at Pinnacle. I think, in my view, that's where these golfers are all coming from, and it's so exciting to see what they're doing. And I think we're going to have quite a few future Ernie Elses in the making.
I want to pick your brain on one last question. I was listening to another podcast on the way to work this morning, and it was with Wilco Ninabe. And it was Mark Immelman's podcast. And he was asking him what was the toughest thing moving from amateur to the professional ranks. And funny enough, his answer was the difference between traveling with management and a team versus traveling and being completely isolated on your own. Do you think that is a potential downfall of many a talent in the pro? The guys that show massive promise as amateurs and then move into the pro ranks and then kind of are completely isolated and lose their way as a result? Do you think that's a common challenge, or do you think it's more specific just to him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think, you look at a guy like Anton Haig. He had management around him. He had fitness trainers around him, and eventually that support base, even though he had all that support, he ended up with struggles in his career, and he's back in South Africa now trying to rebuild his game. I certainly think that it makes it a bit easier. I mean, Gavin Levinson's one of our teaching pros here at Royal, and I love his stories. And these guys, from the way golf used to be played on tour to the way it is today, it's just changed remarkably. I mean, Brandon Stone doesn't get on an aeroplane unless it's at the front with his fitness coach. And then when he gets there, he lands, he goes and talks to his psychologist. And I think all those things certainly help the guys. But I think in certain cases, it can also complicate things, I'm not convinced that there's a silver bullet, but I think it's about guys like Wilco. Everybody wants a piece of Wilco at the moment. But I think it's about them also saying, I need to make sure I've got good balance. And like anything in life, wellness, fitness, food, too much practice, too little practice. I think you just want to get that good balance, take care of yourself, make sure that you're doing all the right things and not overcomplicating things.
Yeah, it's amazing how that principle is true to pretty much everything you do, is that balance between, I mean, you can even take it into the wine space in my family's careers. A good balanced wine is a successful wine. A good balanced career is a successful career. Often very difficult to find that balance when a lot of balls are in the air. But Chris, again, from my side, it's always so inspiring to listen to you. I think not just your words and your insight, but I think the conviction and the authenticity with which you speak is it's so inspiring for me, and I think inspiring certainly for the guys who listen to this as well. And lastly, I think just to acknowledge the fact that it's people like you who, in terms of an industry, move the industry in a certain direction and in a good direction, because as we spoke about earlier, to make a change like you have in a club requires a lot of courage, and it requires a lot of fortitude. It's not something which just happens and next day carries on. It requires a lot of bravery. So I think I just want to acknowledge that from I suppose on behalf of the rest of the industry, is to say well done. And it's people like you that shift things for the better for the long term. So thank you for your time and thank you for your conscious attention. It's really, really appreciated.
Well, I'm very humbled with your comments there, and I think we live in the most incredible country, and we need to remain positive, keep our eyes on the horizon, and maybe the stuff that's happening around us is happening for a reason. And who knows? I think that rainbow is going to shine, in my opinion. And I also, before we leave, I want to say two things. This podcast has become almost an integral part of the industry now. And I want to congratulate you on this podcast. I don't miss an episode, and the conversations are incredible. And I'm so chuffed for the traction that it's received and the support that it's received. But I want to set up, I think it's time that the tables turn, and I think we need to set up a small panel where we can interview you, Rob. So I put that challenge to you. I'm going to call on somebody like Dale Hayes and maybe Jeff, and the three of us, we can throw some questions your way, because as much as, we've really enjoyed adding value to the industry and having these chats, the contribution that you're making to this industry can't go unnoticed. The positive impact you're having on clubs and people and inspiring us to be better is quite remarkable. I don't think there's anybody else actually that is doing what you're doing in the golf space. And I have to compliment you, and I can't wait to interview you one of these days.
Well, I hope you've got a nice glass of something to enjoy while you do it, because I can talk the hind leg off a donkey, you know that.
I'm just glad nobody's ever asked me to chip over bunkers yet, how to do it. I have no idea.
Yeah, well, I think that's the interview will have to be complemented by a round on that major East Coast of yours. So the two will have to go hand in hand in some way, shape or form.
Absolutely. And Rob, if you don't mind, just in closing, obviously, it has been tough times for a lot of people, and the ongoing pandemic and the other challenges that we face in South Africa. I just want to say I encourage everybody to stay positive. And I'd like to leave you with a quote from a person called Jay Danzy, which says, "Your smile is your logo, your personality is your business card. How you leave others feeling after an experience with you becomes your trademark. And forget about the masks and people can't see your smile. Smile, they can feel it." So stay positive. And Rob, once again, thank you for having me. Keep doing what you're doing. And like I said, I can't wait to interview you, China.
That's it for today, guys. If this episode brought you value, please do subscribe to the podcast series. And for more information on building your organizational culture, visit us at rcaconsulting.biz. We'll see you in the next episode.